Okay, so we've already drawn out the drape of our fabrics for the different types of drape. So the high soft drape is closer to the body, high and full body is further from the body. Now I want to do this bonus video to show you how to render these different fabrics. The logic is the exact same for either option of the drape. So this is a great way to start playing with multiple shades. So if you've already done the previous videos of practicing rendering with one shade per garment, this is a great one to start layering up shades. So choose maybe 3 different shades that are similar to each other, and let's go ahead and practice this. I've made a photocopy of these traced images onto marker paper, and we can see a little bit of that line down the center. If that happens to you and you really don't like it, you can lighten up your photocopy machine to go even lighter, and then hopefully that doesn't show for you. But since I'm using grays for this exercise, I don't really mind that it's there. Hopefully it won't show up. And if it does, it's just for my little rendering scale for the draped fabrics. So it's just for my reference. So let's go ahead and do this together. So from your 3 different colors you've chosen, choose the lightest color first. We always work with the lighter colors before going and layering it up with the darker colors. And if you haven't used any markers before, I recommend that you just use one color to start with, like we went through in the other rendering videos. But you'll follow the same process but with just one color, just layering up multiple layers of that single color. Once you get that exercise of practicing rendering done, then definitely layer up the colors for this exercise. So I'm going to go through and do the entire skirt with the lighter gray color. We're going to start on one end and we work our way over. If you're left-handed, you're going to want to start on the opposite side. And we're using that brush tip. We're following the lines as best as we can along the outer lines. We have to work fast with those markers. There are inconsistency in the shading. That's actually a good thing. It adds a little bit more depth to it. So don't worry about it if it's not all the same exact shade throughout. Always move that sketch as you need to when you're rendering it. Go ahead and let that dry and we'll repeat the same step over here. We're always pressing lightly on the marker. Markers do tend to bleed a little bit, so we don't go all the way to the very edge, but just really touch lightly on the edge of your sketch. Now, if I was rendering a fabric that was very shiny, I would for sure leave a little bit of white showing through, and that helps indicate the sheen of the fabric. If you're going outside of the edges slightly, don't worry about that. We'll go through it with a black marker at the end. And as we're rendering, we're always using that side of the marker and lightly pressing with the tip along the edges. So you can see I got out of the line just slightly there, and we can always fill that in with a black marker at the end. Okay, so my light layer is done. I'm going to start working in additional layers here. So I'm going to use my next color, which has a slight bit more blue into it. I want to imagine that the back and the higher hemline is the back of the garment. It's the folds, and there would be a shadow in that back area. So I need to indicate shadows back there. That's going to go with my darkest color. And I'm also going to work it in with this lighter color too. So I'm going to imagine where that light source is coming. Once again, I'm going to be coming kind of from upper right corner. That's where I generally do it from. So the light source would be kind of coming this direction, which means anything on the highs of that direction would definitely be the lightest color. So I don't want to color in the entire section with the secondary color here. I'm just going to use it kind of sparingly and start layering it up. So I'm going to go ahead and do it on the left side here. We can see that is a pretty dark color compared to the other color. And I'm going to kind of do these little round shading toward the bottom. Just continue that going with the same similar concept, but maybe slightly different amounts on each one, slightly less as we come closer to the light source. Even though the light source is coming here, we could have a slight shadow on this side indicating the roundness of the body, especially if this was a fashion illustration and not a flat garment sketch. So I will go ahead and add a slight shadow on this side as well. So we can see that is a pretty harsh color compared to the lighter tone. So we're going to blend it in with the lighter tone now. Going back to that lightest color, I want to shade in next to it. I'm just going to shade in parts. Okay, so she is quite full here. Right, and I'm going to come in with the same coloration and hit the other sides here of those folds. Going back through another round next to that previous one to slightly blend in those shades, going over that previous color as well. So whenever they're not blending well enough, we need to go through it another time until they're kind of getting closer to blending. Okay, so we're pretty good there. We're gonna hit up the back now with the second middle color. And I am going to add a slight depth to it. Okay, we're gonna come back in with the darkest color, coming in closer to those fold lines to really indicate the shadow here. Just so you know, when you are using multiple colors, it is so much harder to get those colors to blend. So I recommend, until you really get the hang of it, to just use 1 or 2 colors maximum and not have such a big difference between the two. So we're kind of hitting up in between those two to blend it a little bit more. Because we can already see this was our secondary swipe of the same exact tone, but you can see how different it makes it look. So oftentimes that's actually enough to add a little bit of shape and depth to those styles. Okay, let's go ahead and try a black outline to see how that makes it look, if it looks complete or not. When we're doing the black outline, we definitely want to have a soft hand. Okay, so that one is pretty good to go. We'll follow that same exact logic over on this side and start layering it up. Okay, so I have the lightest color. I'm gonna actually do that shade first before I jump to the darker color or middle color. I'm gonna bring that down a little bit, and we can always play with that shading slightly differently if we want. They don't have to be the same exact vantage point if you don't want them to be. And since I am doing things in a slightly different order this time, instead of jumping to my middle color first, I do know that my end result might look slightly different. Go ahead and start blending that one in with another in-between color here. So when you are blending colors, you don't need to wait for it to dry. When you're using these micron pens or any sort of small black markers, they do take longer to dry than the alcohol-based markers. So make sure you allow it to dry before your hand rubs over it. And since I did come out of the line here, I'm going to have to smooth that out a little bit. And we can always make that black line a little bit thicker to cover it up. Now, if you have multiple areas like that, or if it just doesn't look right, like you've made it too thick, you can continue that thicker line a little bit further down to blend it better. And then it just looks more like a variable line thickness. And I'll do it over here as well. So it kind of reflects similar line thickness. All right, so you can see it's definitely much harder to layer up multiple colors and make it look nice. It's so much easier to just use one tone, but I do think it's good to use multiple tones in some fabric choices. So keep trying, keep practicing, and it does get a little bit easier as you continue. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these out and then add them to my scale so I have a reference. All right, my scale is complete with the exception of the average. If you want to continue, do that same exact process with the average, which is between this drape and this drape here, right in between there. And you can go ahead and follow along in that previous video where we drew these and then render it up with the same exact logic. All right, I took a step back from my renderings and definitely noticed that my black line could be pulled up higher so that the folds of the fabric kind of fall into those darker lines a little bit better. So I pulled those up to be about as high as the background rendering of the back folds. And I think it's looking a little bit more clean now. So always take a break from your sketches, and when you come back to it, more often than not, you're probably going to make a few little updates to it to try to blend it better or make it look more finished in any sort of way that fresh eyes help with. Today's video was brought to you by the Fashion Design Book. In case you don't have a copy of the Fashion Design Book yet, you can find it on Amazon and most online book retail stores. There's also a link to it in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.